Hello everyone, my name is Rick Lyons, sometimes known as the Ferryside Piper, and I'm here on a very wet and foggy Christmas morning in southwest Wales, going out to do my annual harvest of elder, which I will season and use throughout the rest of the year to make drone reeds. I've been making elder drone reeds for the last 2 or 3 years, and I tend to get a lot of questions about it from other people, so I thought I'd try making a video about how I go about doing it. If you have some experience of making cane drone reeds, you'll see that there are some techniques that apply, but at the same time, elder is a different material. And it's a fantastic material for making very, very stable and lovely sounding drone reeds. So we'll get started. Now, obviously, the first step to making elder drone reeds is to identify an elder tree or an elder bush. I'm fortunate here in Southwest Wales. It's a very rural area. There are lots of wooded areas and lots of places to look. The best thing to do if you're not familiar with what elder looks like is to identify the plants in the summertime, because the bushes have a very distinct and recognizable groups of berries that grow on it. So what I tend to do is identify appropriate bushes during the summer months and take a mental note of where to come and find them in the winter. Now, these are some of my favorite elders that I came to last year as well, right here along the river, and has a good supply of branches of various diameters. I'll just find some appropriate diameter twigs and cut them off so you can sort of see. Also the pith inside that will dry out later on. Here's my harvest from 2 different sets of elder trees. You can see I've got more than enough now for myself and also for any of my friends who want some. Now, back home in the workshop, this is an example of some of the branches I've come back with. Now we're going to start preparing them for seasoning, because ultimately what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to have dried them out and measured them for diameter and categorized them. This is some of my elder from last Christmas time. As you can see, it's all categorized and the pith's taken out, ready to be made into drone reeds of various kinds. So basically what we're looking for now is to break them down and dry them out. So you'll have a box like this. This actually is an elder. This is a plant from my back garden, which I think is Mexican mock orange, but which also makes really nice drone reeds. But back to the elder. We come back from the woods with some examples like this, and we start to cut them. See, they have the pith in them, obviously. And try to cut them just above the nodules. You see it grows in sort of sections. And you want to try to cut them just above those nodules. Here's a bit of a messy one. And these are quite large branches, which I thought would turn up better on video. Obviously, we have them going down to tenor drone size as well. It's probably not going to be any good. Now, you basically want to do this for the whole bag. Cut them down into lengths that we can begin to dry out. Now, this is the point where different people have different methods for seasoning elder. Obviously, before we turn it into drone reeds, at the final stage, we're going to have to remove the pith and we're going to have to remove the bark. Now, some people prefer to do that step at this stage when the wood is still green before it dries out. And the feeling there is that the pith and the bark is easier to remove when the wood is green than it is after it is dried out. I tend not to do that, mainly because I've never really found it that difficult to remove the pith or the bark even after it's dried out. It's exactly the same process, which I'll show you later. And in any case, only takes a minute or two. I should say that some people also prefer to keep the pith in because they actually cut the tongue with the pith still in the twig because they feel it gives the tongue a bit more stability when it's being cut and less likely to break. And so some people will cut the tongue with the pith in and then remove the pith after it. Anyway, we can look at some of the various methods. As I suppose, one thing that I imagine is quite certain is that if you remove the bark and the pith at this stage, the wood will certainly season that much quicker, because obviously there's no material keeping the moisture into the tube, the wooden part of the twig. Okay, I've now finished cutting all of those branches into individual lengths of what will hopefully become reed blanks. You can see just from that small bag of branches, I've got, I would guess, 200 or 300 individual lengths for drones. That's not to say all of these are going to be viable. We'll know a bit more after they've been dried out, but I tend to try to dry everything and figure out later after they've dried which ones I can choose from. An example here, you can see of some of the different types of lengths and diameters that come out of the harvest. And these are all, perfectly good diameters and lengths for everything from base drones down to tenor drones. Okay, now that box of prepared elder has now been tucked away in a very hot and dry cupboard, and I'll leave it there for a few weeks to season. So for now, we'll get on to demonstrating the steps of turning a piece of elder branch into a drone reed. And I guess to start off with just one note of caution is that when working with elder, do your best not to inhale or ingest any of the dust that's produced as part of the process, because unlike with cane, for example, elder dust has a mild level of toxicity to it. It's not poison, it's not going to kill you, but if you inhaled or got enough of it in your mouth, it would probably make you feel sick. So what I tend to do is, in between each step, I will clean my bench with a little vacuum cleaner that I have. So the first thing to do when preparing the reed is to remove the pith from the twigs, the interior soft part. As I mentioned yesterday, some people prefer to remove the pith and the bark while the twigs are still green. Some people even prefer to cut the tongue into the branch when the wood is green, or you can do it when the wood is seasoned. These particular bits of elder are ones that I cut this morning, mainly because I don't have any seasoned ones that haven't already had the pith removed. So I'll show you with these green ones. The process is exactly the same. The tools are exactly the same. Essentially what you need is, what I use, is a series of different diameter drill bits, a little rat tail file, and a pair of pliers. Now you might have noticed earlier in the video that when we cut the elder at the nodules, we get sometimes very, very long pieces, much longer than you'd use for a normal reed. And this isn't a problem because you could turn this into two reeds, or in some cases you might have a long piece that's bent and maybe only one part of it is actually kind of straight enough to make a drone reed from. But we'll use this one as an example, say one that I cut this morning. And so what I will do to remove the pith, it's too long really to remove as is, so I will turn it into two separate reed blanks. Cut that there. And I begin with a relatively small drill bit, and I just slowly drill it into the pith. You'll see it comes out. There'll be a little bit of dust that will come out. Do that at both ends. Of course, if you have the nodule at one end, you don't need to do it at the nodule end. You just do it on the one side. There we go. Sort of done the best I can with that one. We'll move up to a bit larger diameter one now. And again, very simple way to do this. Try it again. It's going in easily. Still have not removed all the pith. You can still see some of the white pith before it hits the green walls of the tube. I'll go to my largest diameter drill bit that I have here to use today. Pull that out. And you can see all the dust that's starting to gather. There we go. Let's say that's all the way through. Say, don't inhale it, but you can give it a bit of a blow. It's not quite all the way through, so I'm going to use this rat tail file to push out the last little bit. As you can see, it's gone all the way through. You can see all the pith coming out. And there you have it. The pith has been removed. And this one will now go on to season. But as I say, if this was an already seasoned piece of elder, the process would be exactly the same. Now I've cleaned the pith dust off my worktop. And now I've switched actually to a seasoned piece of cane because I'm going to get on to fashioning the reed. The next step we need to do is to take the bark off the reed. And this is, again, it's quite simple. Use a new razor blade and just slowly scrape it off. Again, be careful, this creates a fair bit of dust. So just be careful not to inhale it or actually get any on your fingers and accidentally get it into your mouth. I should say I have made reeds as well where I've kept most of the bark on and only taken the bark off the tongue. So you can experiment with different things, obviously leaving the bark on the majority of the reed just gives the reed a bit of extra stability and strength. I didn't find that it actually made any better or worse reed, it's just another option. So as you can see, it takes a couple of minutes. And as I mentioned, it's not something that I find particularly difficult to do after the reeds have been seasoned. It takes about the same effort, I find, to take it off when the wood is green. But there we have a seasoned piece of wood. Maybe take a bit of sandpaper just to kind of smooth it off a bit. Again, watching out for the dust. And there we have an elder blank. Now, the next step we're going to need to do is to seal the top of the reed. Again, if it was a piece of the cane that had the nodule at the top, you just need to put a bit of wax on it there for some extra seal, because the nodule generally makes a pretty good natural seal. In this case, this piece is open at both ends, so I need to plug one of the ends. And to do this, we use a bit of sealing wax that you can purchase at any sort of stationery shop, usually, for sealing letters. And you can use that to fill in the top opening of the elder. Now, what I do is a little trick that I learned from Alan Burton, which is to, before putting the wax directly on the top there, is to actually cut a tiny bit of cork. That will fit just in the top there. And this just gives it an added little bit of seal but also ensures that the wax doesn't drop down further than it needs to into the reed. So we just get the there you have it. That should be sealed, but we'll let it sit for a few minutes and then check to make sure that it's sealed properly. This would be the one point in the process where I would actually suck into the bottom of the reed. As I said, we don't want to do that normally because we want to try to avoid getting any dust in our lungs. But it is, in this particular case, probably the best way to see that the top is actually sealed. Okay, I've tested the reed and it is airtight, so the bit of cork and wax has worked well. So the next step is to prepare the reed to have the tongue cut into it. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is to do a bit of waxed thread around the base. We need to do this to make sure that we don't accidentally split the piece of elder too far when we're doing the cane. It just gives us a bit of extra strength at the bottom. And we'll just do a little bit of a knot. So there we have that. Now, the next step is to cut the tongue. Now, this is one of the areas of reed making with elder that is different than with cane. Because obviously, if this was a piece of cane, for those of you who have made cane reeds, typically what you do is you cut a little notch there and you pry it up, and it naturally splits along the striations in the cane. Elder doesn't have that same composition, and you actually have to physically cut the tongue into the piece of elder. And you do that with a razor blade. You can use, sort of a typical blade like this, Stanley blade. But what I found is much, much better is these very, very thin, super sharp blades. These are blades that would typically be used in a straight razor. They're incredibly sharp and they're incredibly thin. I'll show you here. Obviously, pays to start with a new one. So be very careful with these. They're incredibly sharp. But what I do to kind of take the guesswork out of it is to actually draw and mark onto the reed where I want to cut the tongue. Now you see, and this is common with elder, this piece has a bit of a bend in it. It's fine. It's not too bendy to fit inside the main stock, but it does have a little bit of a bend. It's not completely straight. That's fine, but in general, what I try to do then in that case is to cut the tongue on the upward curved side. So for this, I will start to just draw where I want the tongue to be. And again, I'm not using any particular measurements in this regard, just kind of by feel or experience. I don't know if you can see that, but we have the sort of shape of the tongue cut into it. And now I'm going to slowly start to cut the sides first. Slowly work the blade in. Take your time, don't rush, it won't take long. And slowly begin to work it down. As you see, this blade is very, very fine, so it makes a very, very fine cut, which I find is better for the air. And that's gone down to about there. So I'm going to make a mark on the other side so I know where to cut the side down on this one. Whoop, a little past it, that's all right. And then from there, I'll do this piece here slowly until you feel it reach through. And then what typically I will do, rather than trying to flick it up, is I'll go from underneath, see if it's up. There it is. There's my tongue. Oops. And now we start to sing at the tongue. There we go. We have a crow already on the... And that's great. Bit surprising. I'm going to do this anyway, even though it's already crowing. One of the things I find fairly consistently with elder reeds is that they benefit from a tiny bit of weight on the tip of the tongue. I find that really helps stabilize the reed. Trying not to get too much. There we go. Literally, it's only going to take about that much just to give it a bit more stability. And there you have it. If it's not crowing for you on the very first attempt, you can use some of the very same techniques that you would use with a cane reed. You can try flicking it. Again, be careful because the elder, it can be a bit more brittle than cane. You can try rolling it between your hands like that to try to get the tongue loosened up. One of the things I tend to find very useful with elder, if you're having trouble getting a crow, is to sort of pull the reed up just the tiniest bit and scrape down at the base where the cut ends with your thumb, your thumbnail. But anyway, there you have it. Elder drone reed for Christmas time. Good luck, and I look forward to hearing how you do.